So when I was coming up in my college days in the early 90s, there was something going up in DC called the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings. And I must say, I was not a fan of Mr. Thomas. You see, I was a leftist revolutionary activist. And the thing was, I was coming into my own and trying to figure things out. But had I known that Mr. Thomas had gone through the same thing in his own life, much harder than me, I would have looked at him a lot differently. That brings me to this particular documentary. This is called Created Equal. Clarence Thomas, in his own words, is a fantastic documentary, very poignant. It talks about his upbringing, coming from tough love, accountability, and a time where he was embellished in poverty and scorn and ridicule, unlike anything most Black people have ever seen by today's standards. It's incredible. And yet he was able to succeed. How? Because he had strong influences in his life. The reason why this is such a powerful film today is because it juxtaposes against everything we see now with this cancel culture, with this identity politics, with Black people blaming everyone other than their own circumstances, including themselves and their own actions and decisions, whereas there were no excuses for Mr. Thomas. This documentary is wonderful to see. It's filmed brilliantly. We'll talk about this and its impact on society today and how we can learn from it in my next conservative take. Hello, my name is Kyle, and if you're unfamiliar with the way I do my movie reviews, please click the link right here, and that will tell you everything you need to know. Also, there will be a spoiler section, so if you don't want to know anything about the film, then look for the warning label to my left here, and that will tell you to stay clear of that section. So for the story of this film, I'm going to give it a solid 9 because I was really surprised about his story. I didn't know all of the details that he had to go through in terms of the animosity, struggle, the internal strife, the environment of his ambitions, trying to be in the clergy, and just trying his best to find his place in the world. You know, like I said before in my introduction, when I was a college kid, Clarence Thomas was, and still is to this day, very much a whipping boy when it comes to the poster child for the sellout Black person. And I guarantee you, just like I mentioned with Candace Owens, but more so with Clarence Thomas, if people were to see this story, they would understand that not only has he been through more things than they've ever been through, he will have gone through more things than they would ever go through their entire life by the time he was 17 years old. And the amount of poverty that he had to go through, the lack of a father being around so he can identify with many people of today, that wasn't a new thing back when he was coming up. It's more pervasive now. But all of that allows him to identify very deeply with the current generation. The thing is that he walked away before walked away was really a thing. He came to his own through prayer, through loving parents and aunts and grandparents looking out for him, just the courage to stand up and not bow down and kowtow to bullies, regardless of what it was. Strength and all that was something that he had there, and it was instilled in him by his grandfather. And it's such a very powerful story. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is really a good thing for this film to carry it on the way through, which is why I give this a solid 9. Okay, so for the category of emotional impact, I'm going to give Created Equal an 8. I must say I kept my composure all the way through the film because when you deal with these kind of films, dealing with period pieces, dealing with a hard, difficult time, for me, it's a slow burn a lot of ways because you say, well, I've been there, done that. I understand that. I've seen that before. It's bad, yeah, but I hear all that before. But what got me was toward the end of the film when you're dealing with the Anita Hill hearings and dealing with the impact it had on himself and his family. And I'm going to talk about this in the actual spoiler section, so I'm not gonna get ahead of myself on that one. But that section of me fooled me more than anything. And you can see it in his face in high definition, his eyes and his demeanor, that it was a hard moment for him. And it reminded me very much of the Kavanaugh moment when he was going through that same thing. So for that, I would give this a strong 8, as well as everything else in the film too. But that to me was the high watermark in terms of emotional impact. So for the category of intangibles, I'm going to give this film an 8. Why? Because the first thing I thought about was Ken Burns, and I love Ken Burns. It's almost as if it's a Ken Burns film about Clarence Thomas, with Clarence Thomas narrating over his own documentary. That's what it seemed like to me. From the Ken Burns effects, the zoom in of a shot coming out. That's what he is classically known for. From that to the sweeping shots from coming into a bayou area to the Americana farmland area. Just a really well shot with sunsets and the whole nine. The actual archival footage that they brought up from the Anita Hill hearings was really well done. It had to have been remastered. It was great. And it just had a warm feeling about it against a very difficult subject matter. And lastly, the director was able to pull in a lot of old archival footage and pictures, which I thought was really cool and just fun to watch, to let you know that Clarence Thomas is actually a real person and is probably a pretty cool dude. All right, so for the category of watchability, I'm going to give this film an 8, simply because I didn't know anything about Clarence Thomas, other than the fact that I know he had some problems coming up. He was mad and got kicked out of the House. And that's pretty much all I knew about him up until, of course, when he became the Supreme Court nominee. In between that, I had no clue. So that alone made me glued to this particular film. And for watchability, you don't get much information on Supreme Court justices. You just don't. They normally keep to themselves. So for that alone, this film gets an 8 for watchability. So when it comes to my overall score of this film, I'm going to give it a 9, mainly because, not a 10 that is, mainly because I would like to have seen a little bit more of his personality, like they showed in that last scene where he was being very jovial with his clerks that he hired to come on to help him. That was a really cool little scene to see. And it's really different than the rest of the film because he's really brooding and being matter of fact and telling you, hey, this is what happened. And so, but I had no problem with what they showed on the film, because to me, it answered all my questions. But again, I think that part would have helped a little bit more in another way, because I think people would have identified a little bit more with him and swayed a little bit more opinions of him, which I think it still might do anyway. I'm going to talk about this in detail in the conservative take section of this. It's going to be a spoiler section and highly on my own opinions of how it parallels with his life and my life at different times. But really, most Black conservatives go through the same kind of progression. And I'm going to talk about that coming up next. Okay, so this section is going to be my conservative take section. This is going to be a spoiler section. I'm going to cover points in the film that you probably don't want to know unless you want to just see this and then watch it later. This film is a narrative of his life, obviously. But the key thread to this film is his path from point A to point B, and in between there, what kept him, what sustained him. And there were several things. One, his grandfather, his wife, his principles, and God, okay? And they all play a pivotal role through all of it. The main theme of it really is discipline from his grandfather, who basically held him to such a high standard growing up with hard work, skilled labor, and no nonsense, do this or get out kind of mentality. In fact, he kicked him out a couple times. His wife showing him the love and affection that he needed to be able to go to the next level, to be able to take the anger that was there before and push it in a way that's going to be beneficial. And he talked about that. He also talked about the fact that how God impacted his life, how he actually prayed to God to actually remove the anger from his heart. If he were to do that, he would never go back to the way he was before. See, Clarence Thomas was an angry man. He went into the law profession because growing up, his grandfather and people around him were being mistreated by the law. There was no way that they could get around it because Jim Crow was in place and there was nothing they could do about it. So he said, well, I'm going to figure it out from the inside. I'm going to go into law. And so he went in that direction. He ended up going into Catholic schools because they were actually better. He praised the nuns who looked out for them. But he said that the Catholic school was something that he liked, but there was a situation that prevented him from wanting to go into the priesthood. It was a situation where there was a note that was passed around about MLK in '68. It said, I like MLK on one side. The other side said, dead. And that angered him because he thought, no longer is this the church that I want to be part of. It just made him disillusioned, disenfranchised. And so he decided to go in another direction. He told his grandfather he was going to do that. His grandfather said, oh, no, you don't. All this money and time you put into you, get out. So essentially he kicks him out. And Clarence didn't have anywhere else to go. He had one out, he said, and that was a scholarship or an opportunity at Holy Cross. He took the opportunity, but there, being a left university, he got into the whole socialist, Coakley, all that kind of stuff, Black Panther movement, any kind of movement that was revolutionary, big hair, black fist, the whole nine. And that's something I was trying to say earlier, is that this is what Black kids are going through. They're trying to figure things out on their own. And you're giving these false narratives, these false philosophies, and you're trying to put them into a framework that works for your life. And he was figuring all this out on his own. Similarly to Black conservatives. Black conservatives typically don't come from a conservative place. We come from a liberal standing. Our family, friends, neighbors, everyone around us are liberals. We all buy into the Democrat plantation mentality, okay? Not knowing who created the Ku Klux Klan, not knowing anything about where the Jim Crow era came from, poll taxes, the whole nine, segregation. It was all Democrats. The slavery, all that deal, the Middle Passage was all driven by Democrat mindset and philosophies. Redlining, all that. We're not taught that stuff. And so when Americans find that out, all of a sudden, now we become even more interested in finding out more. And so that's what Clarence Thomas was getting himself into. So as he's going forward, being this militant person, being actively involved in riots, his grandfather, who he looked up to very, very much, told him, look, this is not the person that I raised. You definitely have to get out now. I don't want any part of this. And so that left a void in his life up to the day his grandfather died. They never really reconciled, and it hurt him. But that main influence was still there his entire life. And that's one thing that many kids don't have today. And that's why it's so very important for fathers to play a pivotal role in their sons' lives. We're not their friends. We're there to guide them on a path of a hard life and make it navigable as they go through it. And that's what we did. As we get to the Anita Hill hearings at the end, it was that upbringing. It was all that training that he was involved in, that prayer, his wife being there with him, that allowed him to get through it. And even the Republicans backed him up when it came time for him to come back and testify after Anita Hill pretty much did the deal for him. It was over. It was over for Clarence Thomas. There was no way he's coming out of this, but he did the whole thing, the whole speech dealing with a high-tech lynching. After that, it was a wrap. He was going to be confirmed. And I remember being in college, hearing that and being angry at Clarence Thomas for saying that. But now as I'm older, I realize he was absolutely right. He said it was not the Klan that did this. It was not the neo-Nazis. It was essentially, I'm paraphrasing, it was the liberal politicians were the ones that put him through this high-tech lynching. And here you have Biden and Ted Kennedy, which, by the way, Clarence Thomas's wife said, isn't it ironic how you have these two people over this situation where obviously Ted Kennedy, I mean, come on, we know about him, right? And now we know about Joe Biden, right? I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. They were doing this because he was pro-life and conservative, and that's all it was. It was the lobbyists, and they wanted to make this black man pay, having the audacity to stand up and think for himself. And they always denigrate black conservatives, no matter what, with impunity. So bravo to Clarence Thomas. Bravo for this film. Bravo for every black conservative that is going through this, has gone through this, or going to go through this, because it's a path that we all go through. The walkaway movement is true, it's valid, and this is just the walkaway movement before it actually happened. And you can see countless stories of those. If you go online and go on YouTube and so forth, you can see them all over the place, and the stories all had that same common thread all throughout them. So for my final score of this film, it's going to be 17.25. That's going to turn out to be 3.5 stars and an absolute go for my conservative take. Rated equal to Clarence Thomas, in his own words, story is phenomenal. Go check it out. Amazon actually banned this film back in February. It came out in 2020, but it wasn't widely released. And so now you can check it out on YouTube, or I think Amazon still now. However, go check this film out and make it a talking point with people, because it's just as powerful to me as the film Uncle Tom was in different ways. This is just another side of that. It's almost like a prequel to all that, because this really is the OG of conservatives. I mean, he was really the first one really to be out there at that kind of level. Of course, you had Walter Williams and you had Thomas Sowell, but they didn't hit it like this. They didn't have the beat down that this guy took. And so he was out front and center as a black conservative, blazing those trails for all of us. So the important thing is, do you plan on seeing Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words? Let me know in the comments below. If you have seen it, let me know your thoughts. How's it compared to Uncle Tom and other conservative films you've seen in the past? And what do you think about him as a person? Has your opinion changed at all of Clarence Thomas? And if you are a liberal and watching this and are open-minded, what are your thoughts of him now? Has that changed as well? And comment below. I'd be curious to know what you think. And if you like me doing this channel, we take pop culture and politics and filter to you in a conservative manner. In other words, filter to you right. Then please click the like and subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss any future content. As always, please check out some content that we have right here.